What's going on? My name is Joe and I practice talking on the internet, and I wanted to directly reply to this comment. This comment that I got on my recent YouTube video that was toxically tagged white people. And so this is a response particularly to this user because I felt that their question bared ground for a little short video about it. All right, let's get to it. So while poverty affects people across all racial lines, being white generally means that you're not facing the added barriers that come with racial discrimination. In America, you aren't targeted because of your race, but rather you're targeted because of your economic status. And for white people, poverty is typically understood as an economic condition rather than something tied to your racial identity, right? Whereas for non-white communities, racial discrimination is often amplified, or rather, racial discrimination amplifies economic struggles and consequences and issues, rather, making poverty and racial identity very interconnected. Since mainstream analysis, so I'm talking about the Fox News's, CNBC's, NBC's, CNN's, those type of mainstream, whether it be Democratic, neoliberal, or Republican neoconservative news outlets, their analysis often highlights racial disparities over class differences. So race has become the primary lens for discussing inequity because it tends to be not only easier for those to sort of understand in the mainstream light, but it also is partly because the data shows systemic racialization that has lasting generational impacts, particularly in non-white communities where race and class are difficult to separate generally because those two things are interlinked for those groups of people. As a white person, society tends to view your race and economic status as separate entities and separate identities, which shapes how you experience poverty and understand how that is addressed. And then the consequence of that in the mainstream sense, it separates how or influences how poverty is understood and addressed just from news stories and reporting alone. The path moving forward, and something I believe we ought to do, is, as mentioned in that previous video, to have a better understanding of class. You still need to have those discussions about the symbiotic relationship between race and class in the United States. That's something I think is generally unavoidable. However, you need to have those conversations alongside the conversations about working class people, the working poor, and sort of revealing both at the same time, right? That America is a country of racialization and that racialization has consequences, like I mentioned in the video that this comment comes from. But also we need to have conversations about how we actually are more in common as working class people and the working poor. And you can have those two conversations at the same time, but recognize the stuff within that generally speaking, most people who are in poverty will have more politically in common than others in poverty. However, how you got into poverty and how that poverty affects you generationally is going to be different from group to group. So hopefully that was helpful, and I'll see you soon.